Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me on the screen, as always, for those of you joining us on YouTube, Mr. Joe Clark. Today we're going to be talking about a few different Steelers topics, one being the ESPN rankings that go on this time of year. Coaches, scouts, executives rate players from 1 to 10, include some honorable mentions. And it is a great discussion topic. There's plenty of controversy there, including today, Cam Heyward getting snubbed. We'll talk about that and a few more. Yesterday, Juan Thornhill, Steelers safety last year for how many weeks did he even last? Like 8 games or something like that. He said something pretty interesting about Terrell Austin that we will discuss. And finally, we'll discuss the Steelers preseason. It's coming around fast, and honestly, one of the more hyped preseasons that I can remember. Maybe the most hyped preseason I can remember ever. So we'll talk about that as well. Joe, before we dive in, how are you doing?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm well. I don't know about you. Are you still watching the World Cup now that the U.S. is out? You're still locked in.
Still watching it. Yesterday, no games yesterday, but I'm excited for tomorrow. I think it's France Morocco, and that's actually here. That's in Foxborough, so that'll be a fun game to watch tomorrow.
You haven't. Oh, I forgot there were games there. You didn't manage to go to any of them, did you?
No, no. I didn't get anything through the initial ticket lottery, and tickets are just way too expensive. And since so many of them were early in the day during the week, it just wouldn't have worked out anyway.
Right. Oh, so you did try in the ticket lottery system.
Yeah, and initially I gave it the old college try, but kind of gave up pretty quick.
Well, I think I'm pretty much tapped out. I'll check back in 4 years on soccer. That's the kind of soccer fan that I am. I'm now shifting my attention to Saturday. There's a couple of fights that I'm looking forward to watching. I'm a big Paddy Pimblett fan, so I'm looking forward to his fight there against Saint Denis. But we'll move on to the football portion of the show. Of course, the ESPN rankings, as we said, that's where we're going to start. And the very first one that dropped was it corner, I think? Yes, cornerbacks dropped on Monday. Tuesday, they did edge rushers. And sorry, am I missing one?
They did running backs, but the Steelers obviously did not
Right.
factor into that.
Okay, but the 3 relevant ones so far are corner, edge, and defensive line. The Steelers technically had players on all 3 lists, but plenty of controversy abound with those placements. I thought the most interesting, we already kind of hinted at the Heyward snub. We'll talk about that in a second, but I think the most interesting and maybe pertinent one right now is the Joey Porter Jr. placement because, again, this is coaches, execs, scouts, and their input on where players stack up. So this isn't just fans kind of BSing, their rankings, which may or may not be based in full reality some of the time. This is people who are actually, grading the players and having some input on what the players get paid. And of course, with Joey Porter Jr.'s contract negotiations going on, him placing 12th on the list behind, I think, or was he 12th or 13th? I should know this, but he wasn't in the top 10. He was in the honorable mentions. I believe it was 12th that he ended up being
Yeah.
placed. And so what does that tell us? Does that tell us anything? Is that about what we expected? Does that change the outlook for his pay? Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I wasn't super surprised with where he placed on the list. I mean, I guess yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised if he made the back half of the top 10, but him getting an honorable mention makes a lot of sense to me. Um, I mean, I think given the fact that isn't a big, he hasn't forced a ton of turnovers. He hasn't got a lot of interceptions. That kind of can knock him down a little bit in the eyes of evaluators, even though, for the most part, he's done a good job taking away teams' top receivers. But yeah, I mean, a top 12 cornerback in the league, I think, is a pretty fair placement for him. I think obviously he's still young. There's room to ascend. But for right now, I wasn't super surprised that that was where they had him.
A couple interesting things about his placement. Fowler kind of gives some commentary to set up the list for each position in general. And for the cornerback group in particular, he said that the top 10 was really quite locked in. There wasn't a ton of variance. I think 85% of the ballots had, 7 of the same cornerbacks appearing. So it's not like there was a wide variety in opinion. There kind of is like a solidified top group in the eyes of these talent evaluators, and Porter isn't one of them. Now, there was one quote from I think it was an NFC defensive coach. They get quotes on each of these players, and because Porter was an honorable mention, he just got one small quote. And here it was. The pantheon of elite cornerback, or sorry, this is not the right one. He takes all the stress off the pass defense. He matches the best receiver in man coverage, and teams roll away from him in zone. So nothing really groundbreaking there, but it kind of makes me wonder, what does Porter need to do to even be considered a top 10? I think it's just as much about who's ahead of him, because there's a lot of cornerback talent in the league right now, but is it really just as simple as getting like 3 or 4 interceptions in one year? Or, if he gets paid like a top corner, will that suddenly make people realize him as a top corner? What will it take?
I honestly truly think it's the turnovers. I mean, you saw J.C. Horn was number 8 on that list. Well, he had 5 interceptions last season. If J.C. Horn has 1 interception last season, I don't think he's making the top 10 on that list. Jerry Porter Jr.'s only had 1 interception in each year of his career. I mean, given that, he had 14 passes defense last year, I think all he has to do is bump that number up to, 3 interceptions in the season. It's like, all right, now this guy's a top 10 corner in the eyes of evaluators. But just the fact that he hasn't had those turnovers, I think, is kind of just what's keeping him down on the list. Like, very solid cornerback, though. You got good praise there from the NFC defensive coach, but he just hasn't taken the ball away. And I think, in a league where takeaways are king, the fact that he just hasn't necessarily shown the ability to become a guy that's going to get you 3 or 4 a season is what's just kind of hurting him in the eyes of these executives.
You talked about it a couple weeks ago, or you wrote about it rather, a couple Sundays ago, about 2 other fellow 2023 draft class corners that are potentially holding up Porter's contract negotiations, those being Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon. The only problem is Gonzalez and Witherspoon are 3 and 4 respectively on this list. And so when they do get contracts, one, they will be resetting the market. That's how that works. If you're kind of in that top 3 or 4 conversation, you're most likely going to be resetting the contract market at your position, just with the nature of the growing salary cap. And so, one, if both Gonzalez and Witherspoon sign before Porter, even if he isn't resetting the market, he's probably getting north of $30 million per year at that point. And 2, if he really is, kind of counting himself in that same bucket, he's clearly not viewed that way in the eyes of the talent evaluators. So should he be? And B, I mean, is there any case whatsoever for Porter to think that he can reset the market?
I don't think there's any case you think can reset the market, but that's where this gets so tough for the Steelers, because Porter's going to want to wait and see what Witherspoon and Gonzalez get. And even if, he's not resetting the market or getting the same money they get, he's going to want close to it. And I think that's where the Steelers kind of have to be proactive about getting this deal done early. I mean, Witherspoon and Gonzalez, like you said, are both easily going to clear $30 million. If the Steelers can get something with Porter done in the high 20s at this point, I think that's probably a win, just given the fact that, the Steelers kind of had this situation with TJ Watt last year, and obviously Watt much more proven at that point last year than Porter is right now. And it was reasonable for Watt to reset the market, but the Steelers sat and waited and saw Max Crosby get paid. They saw Myles Garrett get paid, and then TJ Watt says, all right, now I want more money than Myles Garrett, and the Steelers have to pay more money than they probably wanted to TJ Watt. I mean, Joey Porter Jr., if he wants more money than Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon, I think you don't give him that money. But I also think there will be some reasonable there will be a reasonable expectation. However, the sooner they get their deals and Porter's sitting and waiting, the closer he's going to come to those deals, and it's going to be worse for the Steelers.
Porter technically taken in the top 32 picks that year, but because the Dolphins forfeit their first round pick, it counts as a second round pick. Therefore, he doesn't have a 5th round option baked into his contract. He's not technically a first rounder. The other 2 are first rounders. They do have that 5th-year option, and so there's no guarantee that either of them will do a contract extension this year. The teams could opt to wait. Sometimes that does happen. So that's another interesting wrinkle to the conversation as well. I kind of worry that if you look at what happened in the receiver market, for example, the top of the receiver market just like a little over a year ago was like 30, 32, 33 million. Then all of a sudden you have Jamar Chase signed for 40.2 million. Now you have Jackson Smith and Jigba at 42.1 million. And you kind of see the trend. It rapidly, I mean, we're talking like prior to that, it used to just climb like $1 million or $2 million every time. But because the salary cap's gone up so much, now players are starting to ask for these crazy high jumps. And that's really pushing the entire market up. We saw that with Chase. And then, right after him, you see, Drake London just signed for 35.2, which would have led the market last year. And Drake London's a fine player. I don't know if I would count him as a top, receiver at this very moment. So my point being is the cornerback market could potentially that same thing happen where, man, if Christian Gonzalez or Devin Witherspoon end up signing, and instead of right now it's at 31, I think is the top of the market. If they sign for an APY of like 37 or something all of a sudden, man, does that end up hurting the Steelers in this Joey Porter Jr. situation? And at what point is there a point where the Steelers just go, I don't know if we can do this?
Yeah, I certainly think that if those two guys get a deal well above the current top of the market, and then Porter is obviously going to want, so let's say they get 37 and Porter wants 34, the Steelers really going to view Joey Porter as a $34 million player. That might be a situation where they kick the can down to next offseason. They have the option, they can franchise tag him. Though there will be opportunities for them to re-sign him after this year. But I think if you're getting up into those numbers, I think it would not behoove the Steelers to do a deal right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I really hadn't thought about that, just how drastically the wide receiver market jumped and the possibility of that. I really do think like there's a greater chance than people think that this thing ends up as a franchise tag situation. The Steelers haven't really used that tool in a while, but it is a tool for a reason. And, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all if this thing, takes a huge jump in the cornerback market. So we'll see. Training camp's quickly approaching. We're kind of in the period of time where, probably not a lot of negotiation going on, maybe picking up now that, maybe people are back from vacation and stuff. So maybe we start to hear more about it, but not a huge concern that there hasn't been news on that front right now. I wouldn't really have expected anything to happen over the last couple weeks anyways. So moving on. Just a quick mention. TJ Watt was 7th on the list. Jeremy Fowler broke things up into tiers, and I think he had Watt in like the 4th or 5th tier of edge rushers, which, is I guess kind of where you land if you have back-to-back down years and whatnot for Watt there, but still weird to see that after Watt was kind of the premier edge rusher for so long. Herbig and Highsmith received votes, but were not on the list overall. Again, we mentioned Cam Heyward was snubbed. He was not even an honorable mention. He just received votes, this being after he was an All-Pro. I think he was the number 1 ranked player on Pro Football Focus at his position. And so maybe just, looking at his age and kind of disrespecting him, but that's nothing he's not used to. Any takeaways from those 3 I just named?
Yeah, so what was interesting about the Watt one, I think 7th was a good placement, but the fact that Herbig and Highsmith received votes, you looked at the cornerback list, there's a lot more players receiving votes than there were the edge. So with Highsmith and Herbig getting votes, the Steelers basically would be on this list have 3 of the top 19 edge rushers in football, which, I think that's pretty impressive. I don't think it's telling somebody something they don't know, but just to kind of see it and see how, they're viewed around the league from the people making the decisions, I think was interesting. And yeah, Hayward just completely snubbed. He was 10th on the list last year after he had a remarkable 2024 season, and then just to fall off completely it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, the one thing I look at is like you see DeForest Buckner, who's another older defensive lineman, getting an honorable mention, and they're like, no, he's just old and injured. I'm like, well, hold on.
Bless you.
Thank you. He's just old and injured. I'm like, well, Cam Heyward played every game last season. Why are we giving DeForest Buckner an honorable mention when the guy wasn't able to stay on the field last season? I didn't really understand putting Milton Williams when he played 12 games. And yes, he's probably a little bit of a better pass rusher, but he still only had 3.5 sacks in 12 games last year. Didn't understand putting him in at number 9 ahead of Hayward. That was a weird list. I think, like you said, it just kind of you look at his age and you just assume he's going to decline. I mean, that was the big takeaway last year. I think was like they said for Watt was he's in decline. I think with Hayward last year was something like he's destined to decline. Well, he hasn't yet, and even though they may think the drop is coming, it hasn't dropped, and so just to not treat him as one of the better, defensive tackles is a little ridiculous, but it is what it is, and it's probably for him just another piece of motivation for him to use.
Yeah, it's something you would expect to see from like a fan list and not necessarily a scout, coach, and exec list. You'd think that they'd put some respect on Heyward there, but whatever, more motivation for him this year. He tends to look at what's being said about him out there in the media, and so I am sure he's seen this, and I'm sure he feels a certain type of way, and he'll want to prove them wrong, and I am okay with that. So moving on, we're going to talk about Juan Thornhill's interesting comments. He posted some really goofy TikTok like AI thing about like, ooh, which team am I going to go to next year? As if he has like unlimited options. I don't think that that's the case. I think he's probably waiting for someone to reach out, and that probably won't happen until injuries start happening in training camp and whatnot. So Juan Thornhill, of course, was with the Steelers last year. Best known perhaps for saying this could be the best defense that has ever played or something like that. Along the same lines of Mike Tomlin's historic comment, Thornhill thought kind of piggybacked on that and said it could be the best defense. Of course, that didn't pan out. Juan Thornhill didn't pan out. When he was released, Mike Tomlin said he had, quote, subpar play. Anyhow, what he said about Terrell Austin caught our attention. He commented on that TikTok post. Somebody said something about, oh, I enjoyed what you did with the Steelers, blah, blah, blah. He replied, didn't enjoy playing for that DC. Defensive coordinator, of course, being Terrell Austin. And I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about the Pittsburgh's defense in general, just because obviously there's a new defensive coordinator in town. Juan Thornhill probably wasn't a good player, but could he have been used better? I think we look at like Minkah Fitzpatrick as an example. He was, kind of expected to play post safety, deep safety, where you're kind of away from the ball. You're not really making a lot of plays. Thornhill argued that that's sort of the same issue that he had, and he wasn't really allowed to do anything or play, be the player that he thinks he is in Pittsburgh's defense. So I just thought it was a kind of a fascinating look. Probably would have been a bigger news story had Terrell Austin still been on the team, but he's not. So, Joe, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a case where you look at and you can say both things can be true. I mean, we talked about it a lot last season. Terrell Austin's defense completely underperformed, but I don't think Juan Thornhill was going to be significantly better. I mean, he had the lowest PFF grade of any qualified safety when the Steelers released him. He had a couple of just bad misplays on balls. He wasn't good. I mean, this is a player that the Steelers signed after he got cut by the Browns. If you're going to cut by the Browns, that probably says a little bit more about your talent than anything. And yeah, Terrell Austin wasn't a great defensive coordinator. He let teams run all over him. Probably scheme wasn't great. How much of that was, Mike Tomlin and him working together, maybe not the best fit. But I mean, well, for Juan Thornhill to come out and it's his opinion, he didn't enjoy playing for Terrell Austin. That's totally fine. But I don't think Juan Thornhill was getting many opportunities anywhere else. And he played one game with the Jaguars after that last year. And it's not like teams have been clamoring to sign him this offseason. So I think it's more about the player than the coach, even if, I think we can both admit that the coaching also wasn't up to snuff last season.
It's just funny because I dug up a quote of Thornhill last year when he was signed, and he specifically said, they signed me to take away the deep ball. And like, so he acknowledged what his role would be and then complained a year later about that role. And it's like, okay, well, perhaps you shouldn't have signed in Pittsburgh in the first place if you had a problem with that. I, you know, it is what it is. Again, I don't want to beat this to death, but I think there is an interesting conversation to be had about just in general how big of the issue was Terrell Austin. We're about to find that out with Patrick Graham, I think, and just the new defensive staff in general. Communication issues have plagued the team for years, it seemed like, and I think we're really about to find out if that's a Patrick Queen related issue, him being the green dot guy, or if that was a Terrell Austin or / Mike Tomlin related issue with maybe the terminology being too confusing or the calls, the responsibilities being too confusing. I think we're about to find all of that out. This was just an interesting conversation to kind of illuminate that. So I don't want to spend too much more time on that unless you have something else to say.
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, moving to the preseason, it's rapidly approaching. I mean, I think the first game's on the 11th or something, 17th. I don't know. It's coming up in like a month, basically. And I don't know, Joe, is this the most anticipated preseason ever for the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that you have a new coach, you have two young quarterbacks that will be getting their first NFL action because Will Howard didn't play last year. There's a lot of change overall, and every single game is going to be on national television, so you don't have to, pull up Stream East or whatever. I think Stream East got shut down, but to try to watch these games if you're out of market, I think there's a lot of buzz, and I think it's pretty exciting. I think people are excited, even though preseason. How much does it matter? I think it'll matter a lot for Will Howard. It'll matter a lot just to see what Drew Aller can do against NFL level competition. I mean, I wouldn't read too much into what we see out of Mike McCarthy and Patrick Graham, but it'll be interesting to see, if there's a wrinkle or two thrown in that maybe something that we can expect to see later in the season. So I definitely think that there's a lot of hype, and I mean, yeah, probably since Ben was a rookie, it's got to be the most anticipated preseason.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers didn't play any preseason game snaps last year, right? Yeah, I don't think he did.
Yeah, no, he didn't.
And so you can expect that to continue this year. Obviously, another year older, so you're going to have a lot of Will Howard. My question is, do you think Rudolph? How much, if at all, do you think Rudolph will play, and how much, if at all, do you think Aller will play?
I think it'll be probably pretty minimal for Mason Rudolph. I mean, I think a lot of what's been bandied about in the media is it'll be like 45-45 Howard Aller, then like you get 10% Mason Rudolph. I mean, at this point the Steelers know what Mason Rudolph is. He's a veteran quarterback. He's looked fine in the preseason. He's not changing any minds with his preseason performance, I wouldn't think. Whereas, I mean, I think for Will Howard, it's huge for him to kind of prove that he could potentially be capable of stepping into the backup role. Allard's just good development, good developmental reps. I mean, I think no matter what he's your QB3 this year, he'll probably be your game day inactive. But if he shows some flashes against NFL level competition, then I think that's a positive. I mean, not just for his confidence, but it's like, hey, maybe this guy could be something as soon as next year instead of more of a long-term developmental piece.
If Rudolph ends up playing like one drive in the second game or two drives in the second game, and that's it for his whole preseason, is that a good or bad sign for him?
It really, I think, just depends on how Howard looks. I mean, I would think it would probably be a good sign that the team has some level of faith in him. But then if he's only playing two drives and Howard comes out and leads multiple scoring drives and looks really, really good, then all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, he took the opportunity and ran with it, and now Howard's on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the games being nationally televised is really no surprise when you look at it. I hadn't really studied the preseason schedule too much, so hadn't really thought about it. But first game is against the Packers, so it's going to be obviously McCarthy and Rodgers. Rodgers won't play, but he'll be on the sideline there. So you'll see those two against their former team. The Jets the following week. That Rodgers, obviously his former team, they played against them week 1 last year, but still interesting. And then Week 3, I think that one's in Buffalo, and is that at the new stadium?
I believe it is.
So that'll be, I think that's their debut at the new stadium, potentially. So a lot of intrigue all around for this preseason. And yeah, I think the one thing that I am kind of worried about, just looking at the ESPN press release of the NFL Network broadcast schedule, is that each Steelers game is starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, and there is another game coming on at 9 p.m. Eastern on NFL Network all 3 weeks. And so are we going to get 3 quarters and then cut off? Because usually, I mean, for us, we want to watch the whole thing. Your average fan probably cutting out around that time anyways. Not this year, though. I think fans are going to be glued to it the entire 4 quarters for Pittsburgh, simply because of what we said. You know, maybe that's when Drew Aller's playing and people want to see what he has to offer. So if you guys are watching and NFL Network is your only way to watch, I would start thinking about, you know, how you can maybe pivot in the 3rd or 4th quarter. It's probably going to be somewhere in between that, maybe the late 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter when that gets cut off there. So, all right, I think that's all for our topics today. We're going to move into our listener questions. If you want to have a question answered on a future episode, you can call the number at the bottom of the screen, 412-254-3145. You can also text that number. Just tell us your name, where you're from, a brief question, and we'll answer that on a future episode. This one is from Joe in Oregon.
Hey, guys. This is Joe from Oregon. Hey, ever since the scouting combine when Darnell Washington asked whoever the quarterback was to kind of throw him a tough one to catch, and threw it over his head, and he still came down with it, I got excited about the guy. And then when Steelers drafted him, I was really excited. In the last 2 years, I've been kind of like, what the hell's going on here? Why aren't they using him more in the passing game? And then I heard Kelsey and Kittle talking about him, that maybe McCarthy would try to use him more, or hope that he would, or something like that. And I'm just wondering if I should tamper the excitement, or if this is going to be a great year and Washington finally breaks out. Would love to hear your thoughts, and I hope you are as encouraged as I am. Thanks.
All right, a question on Darnell Washington. Joe, I'll let you start there.
Yeah, so one thing that I'm excited about with McCarthy, because I was going back, this is probably a few weeks ago, and I was looking through just old notes from the combine when the Steelers were getting their extensions done with those guys. The Cowboys took Luke Schoonmaker. They passed on Darnell Washington and took him in the 2nd round that year. Obviously, that was a mistake, but Luke Schoonmaker had 8 receptions, 2 touchdowns as a rookie. He has more career receiving touchdowns than Darnell Washington. So I think with Mike McCarthy, I think it'll be a focus to get Darnell Washington involved in the red zone. And I think using him in the red zone will be huge. I mean, I fail to understand why he hasn't been a go-to red zone target, just because of his ability to not only just run through people, he can throw him the ball inside the 5 and watch him rumble and fall forward. But just because of the way he can go up and, like you said, just high point the ball that's thrown over him. So I do think there will be a focus on using him in the red zone. I mean, it's not you know, a true 1-to-1 comparison, but the fact that Schoonmaker does have more career touchdowns than Darnell Washington, despite being used considerably less, I think it's probably a good sign for Washington being used in the red zone. And I think Mike McCarthy is kind of a guy that will prioritize using Darnell Washington in you know, a big spot like that, just because of his unique natural and athletic ability.
Yeah, and Joe, to answer your question about what the heck happened and why he wasn't a part of the receiving game as much for his first couple years there, I mean, you just have to really look at his weight. He was 264 at the combine. I think he said by the time he hit the field for week 1, his rookie season, he was already pushing 290. So he had already almost gained about 30 pounds from the combine to week 1. It takes some time to adjust to that kind of added weight. He had never been that heavy. I think he said, like, oh no, my body just kind of filled out. That's what it was. Just kind of the maturation of his natural body that got him to that weight. So yeah, I mean, there's just an adjustment period. I don't know how much I buy the whole like knee concern thing. I honestly think that that's been overblown. But if there was any knee concern, adding weight rapidly certainly didn't help that. And so, yeah, I think that's probably why we didn't see a ton of him. I mean, you're not going to be able to. There's only so much you can do to get the ball to a 320-pound at sometimes tight end. I get he's huge. He can high point the ball and all that, but there's no chance that he could still make that same play from the combine when he was pushing 320. I bet you his vertical is about half of what it was from the combine there. So I think that the positive news is that he's looking much lighter already. Mike McCarthy has new rules for seemingly every player on the roster, but definitely Darnell Washington, a player who, again, 311 last year, 320 plus at times throughout his career, as heavy as 330 during the offseason sometimes. It sounds like they're trying to get him below 300. I don't know the exact number, but if he was 311 and they put a weight goal, I would bet it's not, all right, get down to 305. You can fluctuate 6 pounds in a day. So I would venture to say they're probably trying to get him below 300. If you read into what Darnell Washington himself said, he said his ideal weight is 290 or 295. So maybe that's what they're trying to get him down to, 295. And I think if we get the 295 or 290 Darnell Washington, then really I think we could see quite a significant breakout year for him in the receiving game. Aaron Rodgers already was building quite a bit of trust with him last year, and that was when he was 311 pounds. So yeah, I have high expectations. I share in your excitement. Joe from Oregon, thank you for calling in. I think we've heard from you a few times, so it's nice to hear another from you. That'll wrap up today's show. Again, if you want a question answered on a future episode, call the number at the bottom of the screen. It's also in the show notes, 412-254-3145. You can also text that number if you don't want your voice on the show. That's totally fine. Tell us your name, where you're from, and a brief question, and we'll answer that on a future episode. I'm Ross, that's Joe, and we will catch you guys next time.